Well, EJ, how the turntables. The AFC is once again a complete shit show. Nobody knows who's the best team anymore. All due to the Tennessee Titans upsetting the Buffalo Bills just when we thought everything was kind of shaking out and we had some idea what the NFL was looking like. It throws another curveball at us. Hell of a week of football. They had upsets. We had surprising blowouts. We had a couple games that not just lived up to expectations, but probably far exceeded them. Just a hell of a week. Before we dive into everything, though, how are you, and what are you drinking?
I'm all right. It was definitely a topsy-turvy week. It feels like the first different week in this NFL season, but we'll talk about that as we get going. I've got a beer from Fort George Brewing. Their City of Dreams Pale Ale. Now, I've had things from Fort George before, but I have not had their pale, so I'm excited. It's got some great can art. I'm a sucker for good can art. It's got this pencil drawing of a little town.
Oh yeah. Speaking of can art, look at that.
I think I know that beer. I think we bought that when I was down there, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I got another sixer of it because it's so damn good.
So all right, what are you drinking?
Well, as you know, this is Einstock, the Icelandic wee heavy. See if I can get the camera to focus on it. I don't know. I didn't feel like whiskey today. I felt like beer. Seems like it's the perfect beer for when the weather starts to turn. You know, it's malty. It's heavy. It's a very fall type beer. But very, very well done from Einstock. I didn't have it until you showed it to me, and I was like, ooh, this is actually pretty damn good. But as I mentioned at the top of the show, fantastic week of football. We're going to talk about all of the games and the blowouts and the battles, you know, New England and Dallas, obviously the Arizona and Cleveland game that I was at in person last week, the Chargers getting blown out. Before we get into the first game we're going to talk about, or rather the first teams we're going to talk about, I do want to announce that we're going to have our first Ring of Honor Q&A for all patrons, the top 2 level of patrons. That's going to be this Saturday, October 23rd at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So if you're a member of one of the top 2 tiers on Patreon, we're going to have a Q&A stream just for you guys. So if you already are signed up for that, or rather already are a patron, come on by to that this Saturday. If you're not, you can sign up anytime between now and then, and you'll get it. You'll get the invite. And come hang out with us, talk football for a little while. And we made it at 9 a.m. Pacific because we know that we have a lot of Europeans that follow us, and we felt like that was the best way to fit it into your schedules. So with that being said, let's get to 3 up here. Number 1, which is the elite teams, I guess we could say, well, quote unquote elite, emerging elite in both now. Conferences. Elite for now until they get upset by Derrick Henry again. Arizona in the NFC, Baltimore in the AFC. You could also argue Dallas in the NFC too, but there's really not more than 2 or 3 teams per conference right now that I feel have legitimate Super Bowl aspirations. Again, Arizona, Dallas, throw Tampa in there because it's Tom Brady, and they're also playing really well. Buffalo in the AFC, even though they just lost, they're going to be there. It kind of seems like the cream is rising to the top now, 6 weeks into the season, and we're starting to see the elite teams separate from the mid-tier teams, and the bottom-tier teams obviously separating from everybody. Detroit's kind of in its own tier entirely. So I wanted to talk a little bit specifically about Arizona, which is the only undefeated team remaining, and Baltimore, which after their early loss to the Raiders has just been on a tear and has slowly gotten better and better each week to the point where now they're blowing out other really good teams like the Chargers. It kind of seems like these 2 teams, in my opinion, are possibly on a collision course in February because I don't think anybody in the AFC can beat Baltimore right now. And I'm not sure anybody in the NFC can beat Arizona right now, other than maybe Dallas. That's the only one I think I could argue right now is Dallas. But they're both just playing phenomenal football. They're both dominating in some wins and then scrapping out some wins as well. Like we saw the Cardinals be down to Jacksonville of all teams and then realize in the second half, like, oh, wait, we're a really good team. Let's rip off 20 unanswered and blow them out in the fourth quarter alone. We saw the Ravens losing to the Colts and then coming back furiously in the second half and scrapping out that win and then blowing out the Chargers. It kind of seems like you name the kind of win and they're getting them, and they're both so hot that I don't think anybody else can touch them right now.
Right now is the key phrase, and I would thoroughly agree with you for right now. Like, again, you named, Dallas in the NFC and Tampa. I don't think you can discount Tampa just because it's Tampa. They're the reigning champs. They've got Tom. And in the AFC, it's really Buffalo. Like, they stumbled to Tennessee, but I think Ravens-Bills would be the game going right now in the AFC. And it's not only that they're winning lots of ways. That's really important for any team. That people call it learning how to win. Well, both these teams already know how to win. It's that they do win. They win the games they're supposed to, and then in the games where it's more of a toss-up, they find a way to win. And it's not only the winning, it's the fact that they've overcome obstacles, both of them. I mean, throw as many obstacles as you'd like at the Ravens. They have how many running backs on IR at this point? Like an entire room full and then some. They're on, retreads from other teams who are available on street free agency. And, the Cardinals played without their coach this week, right? Their coach and play caller. But it doesn't matter. The Cardinals have beat everybody in their path, and they've done it on the road, at home, with their coach, without their coach. Doesn't really matter what you're saying about the Cardinals right now. They are rolling off wins. And the Ravens the same way. They had all these injuries early. We saw them lose a barn burner in week 1 when we were at the Raiders. We thought, well, the Raiders played a really good game, and they knew how to win that game. But since then, the Raiders barely lost that game. Again, on the road, hostile environment, week 1, still working things out. And since then, they've just ripped it off. They amassed injuries over the first 3 weeks, and everybody kind of went, would have been a good year for them. And they just didn't stop. And now they go up against the Chargers. It was one of our games to watch. Chargers also a hot team on a roll, and Baltimore flat out embarrassed them. So that's really where we're sort of getting this. It's not really a take. The observation that these are the two teams at the top of the conference right now, conferences, that are the hottest and playing the best football.
And, I mentioned a couple teams in there that are also 5-1 and have a good shot at beating Arizona. The Packers are 5-1. Dallas is 5-1. They play both of those teams. Packers game's in 2 weeks on a Thursday night, and the Cowboys game is January 2nd. So there's still opportunities for them to be unseated, but they've also blown out the Titans, which are a good team. They've blown out the Rams, which are a great team. They beat the shit out of the Browns, which very, very talented. I know they're hurt, but they're also a very talented team. They survived the Vikings. They beat the Niners. Like, they've been through tough games and come out relatively unscathed, at least as far as records go. So if anybody has a shot at seizing this top dog status early and then maintaining it through this gauntlet of a schedule, I do think it's Arizona, because they have an MVP caliber quarterback. They have an offensive line that's playing extremely well. They have weapons on weapons on weapons on weapons. I mean, Hopkins, Rondale, AJ Green is your wide receiver 4, which is absurd because AJ Green's playing a lot better than he has in a few years now. You got the Edmonds and Connor duo at running back. The defense, Chandler Jones didn't even play this week, and they were still getting tons of pressure against Baker Mayfield. Not to mention they have probably the most athletic linebacking core in the league.
And Keim went out and got Ertz, right? You can tell that.
Yeah.
Steve Keim was like 5-0. That's it. We're pedal down. Forget whatever plans we had. This is it. Each team is its own sort of microcosm within a year, and you get 5 games through 17, and you're 5-0. Pull the trigger. Do what we need to do. We don't have a tight end threat right now. Zach Ertz is available. We're going to get him. He couldn't play this week because he's already played on Thursday. He comes in next week. It'll be interesting to see how he gets worked into the offense and starts to connect with Kyler. But when you talk about weapons on weapons on weapons, you got at least 4 wide receivers, if not 5. Chase Edmonds is playing extremely well every week, which is no surprise to Cardinal fans. He's been doing that for a couple of years now. And then you add Zach Ertz into what was not an empty space. They had Max Williams there. He played pretty well, got hurt, unfortunately, and they didn't hesitate. They went out and got arguably the top tight end available before the trade deadline and said, that's it, hammer down, we're going for it.
And I can't wait to see, we're only 6 weeks in, but I can't wait to see the rest of this Cardinals season because it's a special team. I really do think it's a special team. We talked about it even before last season. Their top tier talent could play with anybody. They started 6-2 last year, but we said they were also very thin. Kyler got hurt. Chandler Jones got hurt. They didn't have the depth to survive that. And now, not only are they staying relatively healthier, but they have depth. The entire team is playing out of their minds, and it's really a sight to see. And the Ravens, as you mentioned, are kind of the exact opposite. They have sustained a lot of injuries, but their quarterback is just so utterly ridiculous. And I think their coaching staff has also adjusted really well that they're still dominating teams too. And like once they get, their first round pick at receiver fully healthy, who he was active, I think he was active last week, but again, Rashad Bateman's still coming off that injury. Like Rashad Bateman is a ready to go rookie receiver, great route runner, great hands, super elusive in the open field. Like he's one of these guys who can come off the bench when he's healthy and make a huge impact in these last 9 games of the year. Like the Ravens could only get better, which considering they're 5-1 through all these injuries should terrify the rest of the conference because they were supposed to start slow. As you mentioned, all of their running backs were hurt. Their best offensive lineman was hurt. Their supposedly superstar rookie X receiver was hurt. Lamar was also hurt. They shouldn't be 5-1. But they're just that damn good. So I really do think that these teams, unless something catastrophic happens, knock on wood, I do think these two teams are on a collision course to meet in LA in February. It's been that kind of year for them. Now, 3-up number 2 here. We're making this one on a specific game that I think you and I both loved watching. It kind of got progressively crazier and crazier as the night went on, involving one of those other NFC contenders that could very well dethrone Arizona. We'll see. And that was the Cowboys going up to New England and putting on a historically good performance of sorts. Cowboys total offense, believe it or not, 567 yards on Sunday, the most a Bill Belichick defense has ever allowed in Bill's entire career, which goes back to the 80s with the Giants, ever. That was the most his defense has ever given up in 619 games as a head coach or coordinator. Just an incredible performance by Dak Prescott, who, just like Kyler and just like Lamar, is having an MVP caliber season, which, he was playing phenomenally well last year and then obviously got hurt, and he was dragging that team through every single game because their defense was so bad. But this year, coming into the year, I wasn't sure if we were going to see this early because he's coming off the ankle. He had the really obscure shoulder injury where he didn't even practice or play for 6 straight weeks. Going into the Tampa game, I was like, I don't know. It might take a little while for the Cowboys to get going, but nope. They hung there with Tampa till the very end and then just started crushing everybody. It's been a sight to behold. Everything that Dak does on the field is at an elite level in terms of accuracy, pocket movement, decision making, pre-snap recognition, and just getting them into good plays at the line of scrimmage. He is, I don't even know if I could say arguably, he is the best quarterback in the NFL right now. Maybe not the most dangerous with the ball in his hands. I would say that's Lamar or Kyler. But in terms of the entire package of quarterbacking, what it means to be a quarterback, there's nobody playing like Dak right now. He is on a tier of his own, and I think the Cowboys' dominance in some of these games really reflects that. And they do not win in New England without Dak Prescott. There's Zero chance, because everything that went wrong, that could have gone wrong, I should say, went wrong for them. They had the fumble on the goal line. They had some coaching decisions that made no sense, like trying to go for it on 4th and 1 from your own 34 to start the game. I was like, okay, there's being aggressive and then there's being stupid. I felt like that was stupid. Of course, they didn't get it, and then New England scores 3 plays later. Mike McCarthy's clock management was terrible.
Management,
quote unquote clock management. The defense was giving up some big runs. Like New England got him with trap a couple times. Ramondre Stevenson had a big play up the seam when they ran 4 verts and hit him on halfback seam. DeMonte Casey gave up 2 touchdowns by taking terrible angles as the post safety. Like, the defense played probably their worst game of the entire season, including the Tampa game. But it didn't matter because Dak is just that good. They do not win that game without him. So I think he's kind of ascended to a level that even the people who loved Dak the last 4 years or whatever, even maybe they didn't think that he would ever get here, because he is literally the best one in the league.
He's the thing that impressed me about watching that game when I rewatched it was you talked about in terms of the full range of quarterbacking, and I'm going to talk about from the snap forward in a play. And Dak Prescott right now is the best at doing everything from the snap forward. He's also very good, I would say excellent at, like you said, getting them into the right play, pre-snap alignments, recognizing what's coming. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about once the ball is snapped, there is quick game, there is in the pocket, there is planned movement outside the pocket, bootlegs and rollouts. There are plenty of those in Kellen Moore's offense. And then there's flat out schoolyard. Busted play. I got to the edge. Nobody's there. I'm looking at that guy and going like this. All 4 of those phases, if you want to call those 4 phases from the snap on, nobody's doing all 4 of those phases better than Dak right now. The quick game is probably the weakest part, but he is excellent at it. The in the pocket stuff, he looks as calm and composed and is hitting the most dangerous option on the offense. Not the safest. He is hitting the most dangerous. He is pressing the button that hurts the most to the opposing defense. When he gets out on the edge, we all know he's very good there. He has continued to be very good there and continued to be very dangerous. He is going down the field when he gets outside the pocket on a bootleg. And then the flat out busted play stuff, look out. He's throwing darts 16, 18, 20 yards down the field, off platform, near the sidelines, going out last second. So the full gamut of what you need to do as a quarterback from snap to whatever happens, Dak is playing better than anybody in that entire package. Now, you could take each piece of that package and say maybe there's 1 or 2 other guys in the league that are at or above his level at the scramble drill, at quick game, at whatever. But when you look at it start to finish, nobody's playing better than Dak in combination.
And speaking of quick game, the quarterback on the other side of things, Mac Jones, I think has really acquitted himself well to start his career. Like, the supporting cast in New England, it's not like as terrible as people make it out to be, but it's not great. And they're still hanging in these games. Like, he's still delivering the ball on time with touch and timing and anticipation. I think the pocket movement's been really good. Again, he's not like a terrific athlete, but I think, kind of in that little 7x7 box in between the tackles, he's shown some really good footwork. I think he's shown some really good awareness of pressure and just kind of navigating a messy pocket. Obviously, his time to throw, like, he gets the ball out super quickly, which for a young guy is great because that means that he's IDing things pre-snap and then putting his eyes in the right spot post-snap so he can make a good decision. There were some balls that he delivered in that game against a much tougher Dallas defense than we saw last year. Like that seam ball to Ramondre Stevenson, I thought was really good. The touchdown to the tight end, 85, whose name is escaping me right now. That was a great ball. Inside leverage on the seam route. Yeah, Hunter Henry. That's who it was. But yeah, you could argue that the last touchdown to Kendrick Bourne was a hospital ball that ended up not being a hospital ball. But other than that, like I thought he played really, really well. And again, to even have that Patriots roster in position to potentially upset one of the 5 or 6 best teams in the league overall in Dallas, that's a very commendable achievement. And if I was a Patriots fan, again, going into this year expecting this to be a down year by their standards and a rebuilding year, seeing Mac come in and start as a rookie and play like this, I'd be all in. Like, I would be happy that we spent a first-round pick on this guy. Again, do I ever expect him to be Josh Allen, Mahomes, Kyler, any of those guys? No, the physical talent's not the same. But he's a good quarterback, and I think you can build around him.
I wouldn't disagree. You know, I said my impression of Dak when I rewatched the game. My impression of Mac is that if we're talking about one of those 4 segments, the quick game segment in particular, he might be one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL in that segment. Let me say that really clearly before everybody jumps in the mentions and says, Mac Jones is not a top 5 quarterback. You're right. He is not a top 5 quarterback overall, like I said about Dak. But in that first segment, in the quick game segment, in terms of pre-snap identification, getting the ball up, snapping his mechanics around, and getting it to the read if he knows where it's going, that sort of 0 to 2 seconds period, Mac Jones is playing easily top 10 football as a quick game quarterback right now. He might be playing top 5 football. And for a rookie, that's amazing in that segment of the game. There were some balls he got out in that game. There was a wide receiver screen that, look, we talked about it before the show, looked like a second baseman shortstop scoop and throw on a double play. Came up from the center, squared and fired. Ball came out in like 1.8 seconds. Didn't turn out to be a big play. I mean, completed it. It was a maybe 2-yard gain to the wide receiver. Not a great play, but the motion, the mechanics, the knowledge of, I got it, I'm getting it there, ball was on a line. That part of his game is really good. He's taking some measured deep shots. I'm with you that the long touchdown probably shouldn't have been if the safety took the right angle. That would have been a nasty collision. It worked out for him. The seam ball to Ramondre was nice. The ball to Hunter Henry was in the right place. And it's funny because everybody credited Mac's predecessor at Alabama with being the quick game quarterback, right? And Mac plays better in the quick game than Tua by far. Like, Tua is good in the quick game. Mac is great in the quick game. And if I was a Patriots fan, I'd be pretty darn excited because he is operating that offense at a very capable level. You know, we're 6 games in and he's giving them a chance. That is, I think, above and beyond what you can really expect from most rookie quarterbacks. And he looks pretty composed doing it. He's taking shots, hanging in the pocket, finding receivers. Is the deep arm ever really going to be there? No. Is he taking 2 or 3 deep shots to keep the defense loose every game? Yeah, he is. He's picking his spots. Are they all great? They're not. It's a nice balance from a rookie quarterback, and he's only going to get better. I think it's nice to keep those expectations in check. He's never going to be the transcendent physical talent, but can he be a very good quarterback that moves a football team in very effective and efficient ways? He already is.
I do want to talk about that touchdown to Kendrick Bourne for a second, by the way, because I mentioned it was a hospital ball that very easily could have got Kendrick Bourne split in half if DeMonte Casey took any angle that wasn't complete shit. People were kind of ragging on Diggs for that. I don't necessarily think that one was his fault because there was a great tweet. I'm trying to remember who put it out. It might have been Dalton Miller, where it showed the all 22 and like he was in phase on that route after the speed turn. Like people were saying like, oh, he got turned around. It's like, that's an actual technique. It's called a speed turn. It's so that you can transition faster against a double move and then get back in phase on the low shoulder. The reason why he was on the low shoulder is because the route was stemming up the numbers. If you're in a one high look, the free safety should be able to get anywhere in between the numbers. So he's not going to try to get back over the top and play top down as if it was a stem outside the numbers because he knows that theoretically he should have help. And he was right. He should have had help. KZ should have taken a better angle. So he intentionally kind of sagged underneath in case the ball was left short and inside, or, you know, potentially if it was like a a deep 7 or like a comeback or something like that. He was intentionally playing low shoulder because he's supposed to against that far inside of a stem, and KZ just blew it. So if you want to blame anybody for it, blame KZ. I don't necessarily think it was Diggs' fault. And I think the fact that he had the awareness to not panic and just immediately get back on low shoulder and be in position, knowing where his safety was supposed to be, I think actually that was a good play by Diggs, and it kind of showed that he's a really, really smart corner. And I think if people saw the all 22 of it, and if they understood leverage and coverage responsibilities and everything like that, I think that people would be giving a little bit more props to Diggs and a little bit more blame on KZ.
Yeah, even if you see the TV coverage, because I didn't watch the all 22. On TV coverage, you know that he's low bracket on that throw, right? And he should be. Mm-hmm. He is waiting for KZ. Turns out it was KZ, but he's waiting for the deep post safety to come over the top, right? That's that play. On that route, inside, he stays under, and you can see when the ball goes over his head, like he's like, you got to be there at the same time as the ball. And KZ was, Bourne went up, cut it off, and KZ was like, oh, crap. It was, 2 steps by with momentum, but it wasn't going to happen, and Diggs wasn't going to catch him. And I think it's one of those things. Pat Kerwin had that great book that he wrote called Take Your Eye Off the Ball, right? So you focus on the other things, and as you start to watch football more and pick it apart and understand how all the pieces are working together, you don't watch the ball. You watch the line, or you watch the blocking, or you watch the releases, you watch the things that are going on away from the ball. And most people's eyes, if they're watching the ball, they come into that play with the ball, they see KZ go over, the next thing they see is Diggs 3 yards behind Bourne, and they're like, Diggs got burned. And you're like, well, that's the way it looks, but that's not it. He was where he was supposed to be, underneath, playing bracket, right? He's fully expecting help over the top on that route. So I'm with you that it's a bad look for Diggs, but he did what he was supposed to do, and KZ should have leveled Bourne, and he missed him. He thought he could go for the ball. Bourne cut it off, and that's the difference, right?
I guarantee you, the person whose opinion really matters in that play is Dan Quinn's, and when Dan Quinn watches that back, he's going to be like, yeah, that wasn't Trayvon's fault. He's fine. He did get another pick in this game, by the way, a pick 6. So 7
and not
INGs
just a
in
pick,
6
a
weeks.
Pick 6.
To put them back ahead, and then of course there was the touchdown right after that. But continuing his march towards Defensive Player of the Year consideration by just giving up a lot of yards, but also getting a lot of turnovers. And I have no idea, what the formula is for how many acceptable yards you're allowed to give up as long as you keep turning the ball over and scoring with it. But he's pretty close to being over the threshold, I would say.
His burst on that pick 6, like he's a converted wide receiver. People keep talking about that, right? He's got hands of a wide receiver for sure. His burst after he got the ball in his hands on that pick 6, it kind of looked like Derrick Henry's run against the Bills, where Derrick Henry comes in, 2 guys have angle, and the ball carrier's gone. Like, there looked like there were a couple guys that had a shot on Diggs, and his burst about 5 yards after he picked that ball off was like, okay, you've got some acceleration, son. And he put that ball in the end zone because of it, and he's the most dangerous weapon in the league on defense right now, because he is giving his offense so many more possessions. And this week he turned it into points. He didn't even give it back to his offense. He was like, I'll do it. I got it. I'll come back out. It's cool.
Speaking of Derrick Henry, by the way, 3 up number 3 was Derrick Henry, firmly entering MVP discussion with all of these quarterbacks, Lamar, Dak, Kyler, Brady, all of them. Derrick Henry throwing his hat in the ring. 20 carries, 143 yards, 3 touchdowns. He is on pace, believe it or not, I have it up here. 2,218 yards, 28 touchdowns, no fumbles. If that's not MVP caliber numbers, I mean, Adrian Peterson won it with a lot less than that. And not to mention, people say, well, running back's not valuable. Well, not every running back is Derrick Henry, and there's no way they win that game without him. They probably get completely blown off the field. without Derrick Henry. Because Buffalo was playing well. Like, Buffalo didn't even play poorly. They played a pretty typical Buffalo kind of game. Like, it ended up 31-34. So Josh Allen did his thing. It's just that Derrick Henry completely obliterated that defense. He wore them down over and over and over again, to the point where on that last play, they went for it on 4th and inches from like the 3-yard line or whatever it was on that sneak, because they had zero confidence that if the Titans won the toss, that they were going to be able to stop Derrick Henry. They thought it was going to be another Seattle situation that you and I saw live when we saw Derrick Henry do the same thing to Seattle in overtime. If the Titans win that toss, game's over. And that was on Buffalo's mind of like, look, we haven't stopped him all day. We don't think we could stop him again. We'd rather go for it now than have to deal with Derrick. And they couldn't get it, obviously, and they lost the game. But that's the kind of effect that Derrick Henry has on a football game, is that he scares teams into not wanting to play defense. And this is arguably the best defense in the league. And they didn't even want to trust him in overtime. That's how good Derrick Henry is. That's how dominant he is. 250 pounds that can run over 21 miles per hour on that long touchdown. Fastest ball carrier time in the entire league this entire season. And it's a 250-pound running back. Are you kidding me? He is one of one.
Yeah, somebody posted on Twitter, so my running back coaching strategy should be, grab converted DNs and teach them to run as fast as wide receivers. That sounds workable, and that's why you can't. That's why he is one-on-one. That's why he is a dominant force. The thing everybody kept saying, and it almost reminds me, we talked last week about the Lamar arguments, right? Oh, they'll figure him out, right? And to a point, people had started to figure out how to limit Derrick Henry at the start of last season. And it was in any way to get him going laterally, because he is not a great 90-degree cut guy. He's not a great jump stop guy. He's got a lot of mass, right? He's a good north-south one-cut guy, and he's a great tackle breaking guy. But if you can get him going laterally, typically you can limit, not stop, Derrick Henry, right? Well, Arthur Smith last season in Tennessee adjusted that, so there were less chances for him to get turned to the outside. It was keeping him in that V in the middle of the game and keeping his strengths, which are size and speed and the ability to break tackles. The total he has of yards after contact keeps growing every week, and it's obscene. Like, one other running back in the league has more yards, period, in the last 2 years than he has yards after contact. It reminds me of those comparisons of, like, Kobe's first half of his career and his second half of his career, or points that Michael Jordan scored in 23 and then when he shifted to 45. Like, you have 2 Hall of Fame careers in one player. Like, you have yards before contact with Derrick Henry and you have yards after contact. And if you divided that into 2 separate running backs, they would still both be in like top 10 in the league. So the thing about Henry that really amazes me is he gets a huge workload, right? He gets hundreds of carries every year, and they are tough carries. Again, he is best between, just outside between tackles, like from just off tackle to just off tackle. That is where Henry eats, and that generates a lot of contact. And you would think that after a while, parts would wear down, right? His knees would get bad. His ankles would get bad. All the things that running backs and folks that take a lot of contact complain about. He's still really fast. Again, fastest ball carrier in the league. That's all wide receivers, all tight ends, guys like Lamar, guys like Kyler. Nobody's hit a higher top speed than Henry did in the 6th game of the year as a 250-pound running back that gets hundreds of touches a year. That's the thing that amazes me, is the durability. And he has not, most guys that are speed-based, and it's hard to say he's speed-based because he's speed-based and size-based, and both are elite, right? Both are at the top 99th percentile. He hasn't lost any of his lust for running people over. He hasn't lost any of that lightning burst once he gets into the secondary. like, here we are in year whatever it is at yard, multiple of 10,000, whatever it is. And he just keeps going at top speed, running people over, wearing people down, popping, 70 and 80-yard runs. They mentioned who had the most runs of 75 yards or more. There's there's like 5 guys in the conversation all time, and Derrick Henry's one of them, not surprisingly. He has it all, and you see defenses like you saw Jordan Poyer on the I think it was a second touchdown that Henry had, and he was in front of the sort of touchdown cam. He just turned around and went, fuck. Just as loud as he could. And that's what you've got to feel like as a defender playing against Derrick Henry, because we saw it when we went to the Seahawks game. They played him really well for the first half. Derrick Henry got basically nothing in the first half. And in the second half, he opened them like a can, right? He just pried them open, ran them into overtime, and, ran Tennessee home with a win. It's so frustrating because he's so big, he's so fast, he doesn't wear down, he runs all day, and you'll just eventually lose. And that's just disheartening.
I do want to say shout out to Micah Hyde, though, because he's played against Henry multiple times, and he's a nominee for Bootleg Shot of the Week this week. He was coming from the deep post. Henry was full speed. Full speed. And he knew, he's like, oh, this is going to hurt. This is going to hurt a lot, but I got to do it or it's going to be a touchdown. And he went low. Henry just ran his ass over. He got the tackle, but he paid for it, damn near with his life. But I wanted to say a shout out to Micah Hyde for, basically just volunteering to be a crash test dummy for a play there, because there was nothing else he could do other than just close his eyes and wait for it.
That is personal courage. Like, there are many guys, most guys. In fact, I've seen 2 other clips of safeties playing against not Derrick Henry over the last couple of weeks where they just kind of let up. They just literally let up, and don't have to name names, but if you look at all 22, you will see guys just flat out go, I'm not gonna.
Don't want it. I don't want it.
Right. And Micah Hyde said, I don't wanna, but I'm gonna anyways, and got folded like a bad suit, but he got him down, and that's a victory for anybody in front of Derrick Henry with a head of steam. So that takes a lot of guts, right? Stand in front of basically a rolling truck and go, I got it. Okay.
I also want to mention, by the way, shout out to Josh Allen. Played his ass off, 350 yards.
Great game.
3 touchdowns. Like, he really played well. Came down to obviously the last play. Some people say he slipped. Some people say, Jeff Simmons made him slip.
Yeah, I rewatched that. I watched it in super slow motion. And because I thought the same thing from the wide TV angle, definitely looked like he slipped, like he just didn't get traction. Nope. He got traction on both cleats, and Simmons hit him hard enough that he was braced and his feet just gave, because the combination between cleat and turf was the first thing that was the weakest link in the chain. He didn't slip. He got made to slip, because Jeffrey Simmons is a mountain of a dude, and he played that as well as you possibly could. And look, Josh Allen is not a small guy. He is athletic. He is powerful. He is big.
He's just as big as Derrick Henry. He's like 6'5", 250.
And Simmons made him slip. He had plenty of bite in the cleats. And when you run into a 300-pound guy, basically 300-pound guy that wants to oppose you going the other way, sometimes your feet give way. And that's what happened.
Harold Landry, by the way, we mentioned him last week. Number 2 overall in pressures. He had 30 going into week 6. Was the only guy in the NFL that had 5 pressures in every single game. Well, he got 5 more in this game and 2 sacks to add on top of it. So he's at 7 sacks in 6 games, 35 pressures, elite numbers. He does it differently than I would say a lot of other edge rushers that are in that tier of pressure rate. Max Crosby's doing it. mostly coming off the edge and on stunts. Myles Garrett, same thing, mostly coming off the edge. They'll line up at 3-tech every now and then. He'll go beat up a guard. But Landry, he's kind of getting his pressures a little bit differently than everybody else. A lot of stunts. They'll put him at like Mike linebacker and bring him on a blitz and just go beat up a running back. He will come off the edge sometimes. He gets some effort sacks. Like, he gets pressures from every single different direction. How they deploy him is really fascinating to me, but he's been monstrously effective in, I think, a contract year for him. I think it's his year number 4 now. I'm really intrigued to see what happens with him this offseason because, again, he's used so much differently than every other edge rusher, quote unquote, in his tier of pressures that I honestly don't really know how to value him. Like, I know he's really good, but I don't know how the Titans are going to value him because he's just not like everybody else.
Yeah, and the thing that kills me about Landry is the absolute radio silence on him. Like, you can spin the dial on every sports show, on the radio, on TV, on the internet, like us, podcasts, morning sports broadcasts, talk radio. Now, I don't live in Nashville, but you watch any of the national shows, and I haven't heard his name once. Like, not a whisper. Not, hey, by the way, Harold Landry's having a good season, moving on. Like, not even a glance mention. And I find that so fascinating because he is being incredibly productive. And he is used a little bit differently, and his team is not playing super great. They're playing up and down. They're playing good football. Maybe we'll start to hear it because, again, he picked up 2 more sacks against a premier team in the league.
In prime time.
But nothing. I was waiting for it. I was like, okay, we talked about him last week. Here it comes. Like, you're gonna hear it. Somebody's gonna pop him off on a major morning show. Nope, nothing. You could hear a pin drop over hearing Harold Landry's name, and that's fascinating to me. But thinking about that usage, there are, no player is valued equally to all teams. There are very few players that are like scheme agnostic where people are just like, give them to me. Like, I think all 32 teams would be like, yeah, we can probably figure out what to do with Myles Garrett, right? But a guy like Harold Landry is going to be more attractive to some teams because of that varied usage, and other teams are not even really going to look at him because they're going to be like, their defensive coordinators like, nope, don't have a role for him. Like, don't use that guy. He's not going to be worth his money. And rightfully so if they're smart enough to do that. But in thinking about teams that would be really interesting for him, he'd be a ton of fun in the AFC North. He'd be a lot of fun for the Steelers because I think they'd figure it out. He'd be a lot of fun for the Ravens. I think Martindale would do some really fun stuff with Harold Landry. So, but it is interesting. There are teams that just flat out will look at him and go, nope, not a value.
Let's move on down to 3 down here. 3 teams, players, organizations, anything that kind of had a bad week. Really, it's been kind of a bad season, I would say, for Jared Goff. He has... Now, I want to be somewhat fair here.
Somewhat.
The Lions roster and offensive play calling support structure around Jared Goff is not the same in Detroit as he was getting in LA. But I will say that his complete and utter lack of success in Detroit kind of spells out how much that supporting structure mattered to him. He's not a guy that I think is going to lift up a franchise above their talent level or potentially above their coaching situation like some other quarterbacks around the league do. He is kind of proving to be a product of what LA did for him at the time. Sean McVay, great play caller. They had a great offensive line. Prime Todd Gurley was arguably the best running back in the league at that time. They had great receivers. They had great tight ends. They had great defenses. When the team around him and the coaching staff around him was amazing, they went to the Super Bowl. When it's less than amazing, they're 0-6. And I think when you look at what Jared Goff has done this year, like statistically and on film, it's just atrocious. Like I understand he's third most in the league in terms of dropbacks under pressure. So the offensive line has not been protecting that well. But on those dropbacks under pressure, because he's Jared Goff and he's not super physically talented and he's not necessarily great as a decision maker under pressure, his quarterback rating is like 51. No touchdowns, 3 picks under pressure. You compare that to Josh Allen, who's leading the league, in dropbacks under pressure. So it's not an excuse because Josh Allen has even more than him. He's got a passer rating in the mid-90s. He's got 6 touchdowns and only 1 pick under pressure. So that's kind of the difference in terms of having a great quarterback that can still, take some lemons and make lemonade versus a not great quarterback where if he's under pressure or if maybe he doesn't have great coaches or great receivers, great run game, he's kind of lifeless, So I don't necessarily want to hear an excuse that, well, he needs a team around him. Well, if a quarterback needs a team around him in order to succeed and to not be terrible, then maybe you should get a new quarterback because most NFL organizations, because of how the cap is structured and how the draft is structured, it's hard to have a great roster for a long period of time. Eventually, your talent level is going to fall off, and you need a quarterback that can still keep the franchise afloat while teams reload. Jared Goff can't do that. So I think this is showing why the Rams traded for Stafford and why they got rid of Goff, because he's just not that guy.
Yeah, this was a flyer by Detroit. We don't want to act surprised by this, and we actually held off for several weeks because this was largely expected. Detroit was going to struggle this year. They were in a massive roster hole. It is a huge amount of change for the organization. New GM, new head coach, tons of new players that always occur during that. And this was a calculated choice by Detroit. They were trading someone that they were going to have to pay a ton of money to. They got a bunch of draft picks in return, and they got a quarterback that they felt like they could take a chance with, but they didn't expect Jared Goff to be a franchise savior. All that being said, his level of play, any of the plus plays or traits that you got to see McVay eke out of Jared Goff because of system, supporting cast, pre-snap headset adjustments, are all up in smoke because he doesn't have that in Detroit. And even if you expected a midline level of play, he's been below it. He was okay, and I do mean okay in a fairly generous sense for the first 4 weeks. But over the last 2 weeks, weeks 5 and 6, he's just falling off the table. So we're going to use a stat that you may not be familiar with, adjusted yards per attempt, AY/A. It's a fairly good measure of quarterback efficiency. How many adjusted yards, sort of based on expectation, are they getting per attempt? Higher number is better. He has an average or adjusted yards per attempt of 4.13 over the last 2 weeks. Now, we're going to talk about some other quarterback stats as we move on, and you're going to hear very different numbers. His numbers over the first 4 weeks were average, slightly higher than that 4.13. The last 2 weeks, I think you're really seeing what Jared Goff does when not surrounded by top-tier talent or top-tier coaching. And he's missing open wide receivers downfield. He's checking it down, I would say, relentlessly, almost as a matter of reflex. He's folding against the rush, which is coming. He's seeing a lot of pressure, as we mentioned, and looking sort of generally lost for providing any of those value-added plays. Hey, he could have done this or this. That would have been a good thing. This would have been a bad thing. In most of those sort of two-way go situations, he's ending up with the negative result for the play. And he's doing that really consistently. And Detroit's getting kind of fed up with it, which is not surprising. McVay got very fed up with it in his last year in LA. But Detroit fans are new to the Jared Goff experience, and they are tiring of, this is all there is. And the answer is, yeah, pretty much this is all there is. And the sad part is they kind of knew that. They did it as a salary trade dump to get the picks, and they knew they'd probably be moving on from Jared Goff, but they were like, let's take a flyer and see. But Jared Goff is somebody they're going to have to get off their books fairly quickly. They weren't ready to take a quarterback this year, and it would have been a bit of a wasted pick. I'm just going to throw that out there. If they had gone for a guy like Justin Fields, the team wasn't ready. Justin Fields would be struggling mightily in Detroit too. He would have a few more flash plays, but there's just not enough there in terms of foundation. So Detroit was busy building the foundation on both sides of the line and getting ready for when they go out and select the quarterback they want. And in the meantime, they needed somebody, and this provided them an opportunity to fill that spot. They, if we're being honest, which we usually are, I don't really think they had high expectations for Jared Goff, but even that, they kind of had like, well, maybe he can do this line, and he's down here and sliding, and that's a rough place to be.
I do not know who the first quarterback taken in the draft will be yet. We like Malik Willis a lot. We like Matt Corral. There's some other quarterbacks that are super talented as well. Again, I have not, dove in enough to proclaim like this is the guy. Like last year at this point, we were like, yeah, Trevor Lawrence, number one pick. Let's go. Let's fire it up. But all of the top quarterback prospects should probably start looking at houses in the Detroit metro area, because as bad as some of these other teams are, I don't think there's anybody as bad as Detroit. I think they're absolutely going to be in position to take whatever quarterback they want this year, and then probably have a pick at the top of every subsequent round after that to get receivers and linemen and, DBs. Like, take your pick, whatever they're going to get. Like, they are the bottom franchise in the league. And it's not necessarily Dan Campbell's fault. It's not necessarily the coaching staff's fault. It's not the front office's fault. The roster is just, it's not good.
It's Matt Patricia's fault. It's
Matt Patricia's fault. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it'll be interesting to see their approach. They may not go for a quarterback. They might think they're another half season away, and they may go for a quarterback in the second round. One of those guys that's at like the fifth or sixth quarterback and say, hey, we're gonna grab this guy. They may not do that. Brad Holmes may not be sold on one of these players and might not put all the eggs in one basket. We might see them grab a second round quarterback and a fourth round quarterback and say, one of these, we're going to play these guys in camp and we're going to see. And if we need to go back again to the well next year, we will. This is a multiple year rebuild process. Detroit was as far down talent-wise as any team in the league, and they've got a long road to hoe. So will they pick a quarterback? Yeah. Will they mortgage the entire franchise future to go get one of these guys? Not if they are not 100% sold. So we could see anything on the table for quarterback acquisition for Detroit in the offseason, but something will happen, because they will not try and march Jared Goff out as the sole option for next year. That is suicide, and they know it now.
One of these days, Lion fans will get to Halloween and not already be looking at mock drafts. One of these days. I feel bad for them. They've been through a lot. 3 down, number 2. Speaking of going through a lot over the last few weeks, Sam Darnold started out great. Had a fantastic performance, I would say, in the first 3 weeks relative to maybe what people expected. Obviously, the Jets and the Texans were 2 of those first 3 games, but the Saints defense is a pretty good unit, and he acquitted himself pretty well against them. And then starting with the Dallas game over the last 3 weeks, a switch flipped, and he is not the same as he was earlier in the season. And it's not just, he's playing better teams. Like, on film, he doesn't look the same. He's making really bad decisions. He's not been as accurate. Like, a good throw is a good throw, a bad throw is a bad throw. I don't care who it's against. And he's making a lot more bad throws than he's making good throws. And again, the decision-making under pressure in particular has been really egregious. Speaking of pressure rate, we talked about how Josh Allen's had the most dropbacks under pressure in the league, and he's played really well under pressure. And Jared Goff's third in dropbacks under pressure, and it's played really bad. Well, Sam Darnold's second. He's sandwiched right between them, but he also has played really bad. Only 1 touchdown, 4 picks under pressure. And it's kind of a different situation than Goff, whereas Goff just doesn't necessarily have the physical talent to really get out of pressure and, make crazy plays on the run and everything like that. Like Sam Darnold is a lot more physically talented than Jared Goff, but his decision making when guys are in his face has just been atrocious. It's led to some really bad turnovers, just some really inexcusable decisions. And I just don't know what happened, because he was playing so clean in the first 3 weeks, and then like something happened in the Dallas game and it just went completely downhill from there. And now it almost feels like Carolina's kind of dragging Sam Darnold and not necessarily the other way around. Like maybe Christian McCaffrey being hurt really did matter that much. I don't know.
If this was a book, it would start off, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, right? This is a tale of two cities, but it's a tale of two Sam Darnolds. The first 3 weeks, 68% completion percentage. We all saw it. He looked sharp. He looked dangerous. He was using the wide receiver core that they have, which is very talented. He's making a lot of plays, and the Panthers looked like a force. So almost 70% completion percentage. Again, that adjusted yards per attempt stat versus the Jets, New Orleans, and Houston, 8.54. Remember, Goff's over the last 2 weeks is 4.13. Against New Orleans, it was 7.89. Pretty consistent, right around the 8 mark. And against Houston, a little higher, 8.94, almost 9. So 8.5, 8, 9 for the first 3 weeks. That's a good, solid number for adjusted yards per attempt. It reflected what we were seeing on the field. Sam Darnold being efficient, taking advantage of opportunities, pushing the Panthers to scores through the air. And then comes Dallas, Philadelphia, and Minnesota. He drops in the Dallas game to 6.44. Now you might say, that doesn't sound like a huge drop. Well, it's a 1/4 drop from where he was. It's over a 25% drop from his standard for the first 3 weeks. So everybody has blips during the season. You might think, oh, okay, that's not bad. The next week at Philly, the wheels fall off. 1.68 adjusted yards per attempt. I don't think I've ever seen an adjusted yards per attempt under 1.95. Like 168 is one of the lowest numbers I've ever seen looking at that stat. It's horrendous. It's terrible. It means you probably would have been better off if you sat on the bench for your team and they brought in whoever was behind you, because they probably would have put up a 3.5 or a 4. You put up under 2. That's really bad. He rebounds a little bit, but again, we talked about Goff having a really low number at 4.13. Against Minnesota, Sam Darnold was 4.44. So we've gone 6.4, 1.6, 4.4 over the last 3 weeks. Completely different than that sort of 8, 8.5, 9 average he had over the first 3 weeks. And it's looked like that on film. You can take all the statistics you want. I don't care whether you're an analytics person or not. And sometimes it doesn't match. This matches. Darnold played great for the first 3 weeks. He gave his team lots of chances, kept him in games, kept him right at the front of games. The last 3 weeks, he's looked like he's costing them games. And that is a switch flipped that, again, because the bad stuff is more recent, you have to be concerned about for the Panthers going forward. If you're a Panthers fan, this is something to worry about. This is going on a month worth of, this guy's really not helping us. And in fact, he's limiting our chances to win in what is a very competitive division and a very competitive league. So I was really excited about Darnold in Carolina. The first 3 games looked really good. I was like, aha, see? That's what he looks like when he doesn't work for Adam Gase. And now I'm like, ooh, did the DCs all just get film? And this is what we're going to get for the next umpteen weeks? I hope not, for Carolina's sake. They have picks in next year's draft. They could also go up for quarterback. But if Darnold doesn't turn the ship around here, they're going to have to do something. That's not a sustainable rate of play if you're going to try and win games in your division. And the team's too talented to really put up with that for a long stretch.
Well, if Darnold doesn't turn it around, I mean, they only spent a 2nd-round pick on him, so it's not like they did a massive investment. But they passed on a quarterback at 8 overall or 9 overall. I think it was 8. They passed on a quarterback in the top 10 because they're like, well, we got Sam Darnold. Even though Justin Fields was on the board, Mac Jones, who's played really well, was on the board. Like, Mac Jones is playing better than Sam Darnold is. So it's like if they
sure.
had Mac Jones right now, they might not be 3-3. They might be 4-2. They might be 5-1, whatever it is, because the defense has played well. Maybe not the last couple weeks, but overall the defense I think is a pretty good unit. And obviously they have weapons and everything like that. Like there's arguably a better supporting cast in Carolina than there is in New England for Mac Jones, and Mac Jones playing better. And then Justin Fields, he's kind of got dicked over by Matt Nagy a little bit in his first few weeks, so we'll see what he ends up being. But either way, Carolina passed on the chance to take a talented young quarterback, regardless of whoever you liked in this class, because they got Sam Darnold. If Sam Darnold doesn't work out, and then they can't get lucky and get a quarterback in the future, next class, that decision, as much as we love J.C. Horn, that decision is going to haunt them because they're going to be like, shit, we had a chance and we passed it up. So,
yeah, just for reference, Mac Jones against Dallas, which is, I would say, a far superior defense to Philadelphia. If we want to compare apples to apples, Sam Darnold's adjusted yards per attempt against Dallas was 6.44. That was the beginning of his slide. Mac Jones just played Dallas, and his adjusted yards per attempt in that game versus Dallas, 10.9.
No shit. Really?
4 yards higher than Sam Darnold if we're going apples to apples. And if we're just going week to week, the last week Sam Darnold played, he was 4.44. The last week Mac Jones played, he was 10.9. We're talking about a 6-yard difference per attempt. So when you talk about efficiency and outcome, yeah, Mac Jones is playing better than Sam Darnold, like by a bunch.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see him get to try to get back on track this week against our third section of 3 down, which is the New York Giants, specifically Dave Gettleman, who in his tenure, in the first 6 weeks of every single season under Gettleman, it's 1-5, 1-5, 2-4, 1-5, 1-5. It's, we're going on 4 or 5 years of this, of like, oh, this is the year. The rebuild's coming. The rebuild is almost done. We just need one more draft. And it's just consistently, by Halloween, season's over. Every single year. And Giants fans are sick of it. They wanted to change last year and didn't get it. But the decisions in the draft, year after year, come back to haunt this team. Because they might get 1 guy, 2 guys that's like a solid contributor every single class, but they don't get any stars. They don't get any like true difference maker. Like the one difference maker, quote unquote, Saquon Barkley, can't get on the field because he's constantly hurt. So it's like, does that even really qualify anymore? Like you look back at his last 4 drafts. So we'll start at 2018 when he took over the job. Took Saquon in the top 5, who, again, great player, can't stay on the field. The only other good player I would say he got from that class, and good is subjective here, is Will Hernandez, who's like a solid interior lineman, who's also had some injury issues, but solid at best. Okay, so that's like a passable pick. Everybody else in the class, take it or leave it at best. And then we go to the next year. That's the Daniel Jones class. We took Daniel Jones, top 10, who might be solid, started out the season okay, and then kind of went back the last couple weeks into playing, let's just say loose with the football, not necessarily making great decisions, in my opinion. I mean, 4 turnovers in one game. Like, again, he went 5 weeks, turned it over a couple times, but it played a lot cleaner, sure. And then all of a sudden, he's like back on pace to what he was in one game against the Rams. 2 fumbles, 1 of them lost, 3 picks. He's right back on pace to having that normal Daniel Jones turnover palooza type season in 1 week. And he's part of a class where it's like, okay, who else did they take that year? Dexter Lawrence, probably the best player they took in that class. Player. So it's like your best player you got is a nose tackle. DeAndre Baker, O'Shane Jimenez, Julian Love. Like maybe Darius Slayton is the best player they got out of that class. But like, again, that's a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 that you're hanging your hat on in your second draft class. Year after that, Andrew Thomas, you take as the offensive tackle, and he has not played better than the other 3 tackles taken in that draft range. Not even close. Like
He's
Xavier
playing
McKinney
better
was
this
your second round
year.
pick. This year, but like you compare it to Wirfs, you compare it to Wills,
No.
it's not even close. So, and then this it's unfair to judge this class yet, but like maybe Kadarius Toney is like the one star quality player he's drafted in 4 years. Like it's not good
we'll
enough.
see. Like you said, it's early to judge, but it's Giants fans, and I as much as anybody, or maybe more, I'll just own up to it, have given Dave Gettleman a lot of crap because I felt bad when he took the Giants job for Giants fans, because I was like, you know what you're getting. He's not one of those guys that's going to change his stripes, mid-shift and go, hey, I'm going to be completely different and change up my approach. Gettleman is well established, and he likes it that way. He has his tendencies, he believes in them, and he is not going to shift them up. He has a very long tenure in the NFL. And that led me to believe that he would not likely have a ton of success with the Giants moving forward, because his viewpoint is not terribly what I would call flexible or adaptable. He believes in a certain thing, which may have at one point been the best way to build teams. The league has moved on, and Dave hasn't, and we're seeing that. If you are a fan of a franchise, and we both know Giants fans, and your team is always out of the running by Halloween, like think about that. Midway through October, week before Halloween, and your team is buried at 1-5, 1-5, 2-4, 1-5, 1-5. This is not a one-time result, or a if we hadn't been injured result, or a if this guy had panned out result. This is 4 to 5 years worth of 1 or 2 wins in the first 2 months of the season. It's not ever going to get it done. You're not going to get a division title like that. You're not going to have an easy road to the playoffs, and forget competing in the playoffs. Like you can't kick your way out of the cellar at this point. Like the approach isn't working. We almost rolled Joe Judge into this. He's been the coach for the last couple of years. It seems like the locker room is tiring of his sort of drill sergeant antics. A bunch of primetime shows, including Dan Orlovsky, went after him this week, called him Timmy Tough Nuts. Locker room doesn't.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, Orlovsky said, "Look, guys in the locker room don't like," and I'm quoting Dan here, "Timmy Tough Nuts coaches when you're down 28-3 at half." And his fellow panelists lost it. But look, the entire thing, right? You just look at the organization overall, the success. You talk about draft, we talk about results on the field, we talk about development with coaches, we talk about, is the locker room buying in? Are the coaches leading these men in a unified way to compete? And the answer is clearly sort of no, 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 and no. At this point, it's a blow it up type situation. It's much like Detroit was last year. Like, hey, we've given you 3 years a run. You got all your players. You installed all your systems, and you're still losing, far more games than the guy that was here previously. We're gonna wipe the slate clean. We're gonna start over. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen to the Giants in the offseason. I know, the Maras like stability. They are an old school NFL franchise. They want to have, they're not prone to be knee-jerk. This isn't knee-jerk anymore. This team has been very bad for the last 5 years. There isn't anything like, oh, well, if you give these last 2 classes a chance, we're really going to be at the top of the division. I don't think anybody has that hope right now. This is a wipe the board clean and start over kind of situation, and that sucks for Giants fans because it's going to take a couple of years to get that ship righted.
Also, just look at the division. Like, I'm just assuming Dallas is going to let Mike McCarthy go at the end of the year and promote Kellen Moore to keep him from leaving because he's the most important coach they have. Kellen Moore and Dak Prescott are going to run this division for 10 years unless they do something. Like, they cannot sit back and not try to blow it up and just suck it up, be bad this year, get a good pick, get a better GM, get a better coach, take your swing at another quarterback. And hope that he's better than Daniel Jones has been, because we are how many years into, we're 3 years into Daniel Jones, and he's still having games of 4 turnovers, almost 5 turnovers. Like, it's not acceptable. And like, you're going into an offseason where you have to start thinking about, God, are we gonna be paying this guy? Are we really gonna be doing that? So it's like,
no. It's a fascinating study though, because it's not as I said it was like Detroit in terms of just sustained periods of non-success, but their player base is better than the Lions. Like, they're better along both lines a little bit. They're better than the Lions.
Not by a lot.
Not by a ton, but they have more talent invested along the lines, which, again, if you get a coaching staff that changes the situation and more of those guys resonate, they got some talented guys, some contributor guys, not star guys. And you need stars for sure, but they need a quarterback for sure. And we know the quarterback can change fortunes. So if they do get that high quarterback that fits, they get a coach that can bring some extra things out of the talent they have, because they're not bereft of talent, right? They're not loaded by any stretch, but they're not completely bottom out. So they could be a shorter turnaround than a place like Detroit. It's still going to take at least a season, maybe a season and a half, but they could be one of those teams if they get a quarterback and a new coaching staff. They have a decent draft next year with that new staff, and they start playing well, say at the end of next year. I know this isn't what Giants fans want to hear, but if they start playing well at the end of next year, they could be one of those teams that starts going on a run in the NFC East, season after next, which is not a 3-year rebuild. That's like a 1.5 year rebuild. Or reload, or whatever you want to call it. So it'll be fascinating to see how they go. If they retain the coach and the GM, my condolences. That's all I got.
I would be stunned, and also really sad for Giants fans. They don't deserve that. They just don't.
Yeah,
it's too depressing to even think about. Let's move on to 3 interesting. Number 1, the Raiders winning that game in. I mean, it's unprecedented circumstances to have that kind of emotional week. Your coach resigning, your locker room in complete shock. You're going on the road to a division opponent, hostile environment, and to put on that kind of performance. Shout out to the Raiders coaching staff, shout out to Derek Carr, shout out to the defense. And I mean, hats off to Max Crosby. Like, he's becoming so much more than I think anybody ever thought he could be. Like, he was athletic, he played with grit, he was an effort guy for the first couple years in the league, but he's completely reshaped his body. He's bigger and stronger than he ever was before. So now he can win with power and effort. His hands are incredible. Like, he's so good in terms of being able to neutralize tackles, punches, and just get them swiping at air. Like, he is a complete defensive end in every sense of the word. And it's kind of amazing that they got him in the 4th round, and they took Cleveland Ferrell 4th overall that same year, and Ferrell doesn't even play. Like, Max Crosby is the guy that ended up outplaying their 4th overall pick by orders of magnitude.
Yeah, and you brought up a lot of good points about Max. I was watching the Raiders this week to see how they'd respond, because I had no idea. Like you said, this is unprecedented. There is no this team did this and this team did this when they hit this situation. Like, they hadn't hit this situation. It's a divisional game. It's a historic rivalry between the Raiders and the Broncos. Broncos aren't tearing it up this year, but they're a very talented team, and it easily could have been a kind of trap game for a team that was reeling in the Raiders. And instead, they came out, they put their foot down, they notched a divisional win that was not by happenstance. They won that game. They made it happen. And they got contributions on both sides of the ball. That's a really impressive performance as a team, to come in on basically a short week with an interim head coach who is, very experienced. It's not like this is somebody that's green behind the gills, but it's his first ever head coaching experience in a very long coaching career. To see them rally as a team for each other, for the coaches, for the city, for the organization, it was really impressive. So credit to the Raiders for that. The Max thing is fascinating. I did full workup on Max when he was coming out. He tested very well, but didn't always show that way on the field. He was a little bit gangly. He wasn't filled out like he is now. His body has changed significantly. If you put a side by side of this year's Max Crosby and his senior season in college, it's not even the same guy, right? And he won late in the down more often than not. He was the guy that would just keep going. He wouldn't give up. He would win on his second or his third or his fourth move, or when the quarterback started to bolt, he would throw his guy off and go get him. He was not a guy that typically won on a first move or early in the down. He wins everywhere now. He wins early in the down. He wins with speed because he did, again, test very well, but he didn't have the full package to take advantage of that speed. He wasn't strong enough to hold off NFL offensive tackles. So he's continued to work. He's continued to work on his body. He's continued to work on his hands. He's continued to work on his speed. You see him win around the edge with speed. You see him win with what I'll say is complex hand usage. You see him win with power now, which is not something he did in college at all. And you still see him win those late in the down effort sacks. He had one this week where he played off his man. Quarterback went the other way. He finally tossed a guy and gets together about 4.5 seconds in, 5 seconds into the down, sandwiches him with another defensive end, picks up the sack. That's the kind of sack he had in college. So he's kept that, but he's added everything else and moved kind of what I would call to earlier and earlier wins in the down. And he's as complete as anybody. The production, which is always a little bit finicky, whether it's pressures or sacks, is so far above the mean right now. That kind of growth out of a player at a premium position that you get in the 4th round is largely unexpected. I don't want to say unprecedented because it has happened before. It's rare. So enjoy it, Raiders fans. Max Crosby looks like a fixture for a while for the entire defense.
There's a comeback from the dead story for this Halloween season that we should talk about for 3 Interesting number 2. Carson Wentz, the zombified corpse of good Carson Wentz, has now reappeared in Indianapolis over the last 2 weeks. Maybe it's because his dual sprained ankles are feeling better, and his foot injury that he had before the season is feeling. I mean,
you want a mummy joke?
You
want a mummy joke?
Oh God! Don't even get me. We're not that campy, are we?
I'm sure he just taped him up.
See, you're. God damn it! Can you tell EJ's a dad?
I had to. Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm not a dad yet, so I'm not biologically.
Okay. We're digging Carson Wentz out of his media grave because look, we all buried him before the season. We all said, "Hey, if Frank Reich could do anything with Carson Wentz, it's amazing." Right? Well, for the first 3 or 4 weeks, they kind of stumbled along. No ankle jokes, no pun intended there. It didn't look great. The last 2 weeks, and somewhat quietly, Carson Wentz is back. Like, he's making big-time throws. Last 2 weeks, 36 of 55. That's 65.5% completion. 625 yards, 4 TDs, no picks. We talked about that adjusted yards per attempt stat. Carson Wentz's combined for the last 2 weeks, 12.89. Carson Wentz is ripping the ball. Like, he is back to, like, prime Carson Wentz production. And we haven't seen that in at least a year and a half, probably closer to 2. And
more than that, even.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? This is, like, there was nothing again. He's like the Jared Goff or the opposite Sam Darnold, right? He had not a lot of mojo for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and then Freaky Friday occurred, and he got all the go-go juice and rose from the grave, and those other guys fell off. he's playing extremely well. If you're a Colts fan right now and you've got that defense, which we talked about at length last year, you've got all those offensive weapons that we love. Michael Pittman is playing out of his mind, which we expected and predicted. He was one of our 10 gems. Jonathan Taylor's doing Jonathan Taylor things. They've got a deep running back room. Mo Alley Cox is there. All of a sudden you're like, wait. The thing we weren't sure about was the quarterback, and Carson Wentz is basically rewarding the Colts' faith in him over the last couple of weeks in a huge way. And I'm wondering how long it'll take until people start talking about it, because the last 2 weeks have been eye-openingly different than the first 4 weeks. If it continues, Colts are going to be a force. Like, they're probably become the instant favorites to win that division if he continues to play anywhere near this level.
Also, I mean, look at the schedule they had to start the season, which was also probably part of it. They played the Seahawks week 1 with Russell, and they were still healthy. So Seahawks with Russell, totally different team. Lost week 1, but then they played the Rams tough. Still lost, but they played them tough. Lost to the Titans because it's the Titans. And again, they had not completely imploded with injuries yet at that point. Beat the Dolphins. You could argue should have beat the Ravens, but ended up losing that game because, again, it's the Ravens, it's Lamar, it's going to happen. And then beat the shit out of the Texans. So it's like they're playing top 5 to 6 team in the Rams. They're playing top 5 easily team in the Ravens, probably top 3 team, and they're not 3. And, they're losing to a tough division rival in the Titans. They're losing to a Russell Wilson Seahawks. Like, they don't really have bad losses, quote unquote, on the resume. They just lost to really good teams, and they're beating who they should beat. They beat the Dolphins, and they crushed the Texans. T.Y. Hilton, speaking of rising from the grave, he heard that they were playing Houston and decided to go beat T.Y. Hilton again and get activated off the bench, and then immediately catch a deep bomb against Houston because that's all he knows how to do. Which was a gorgeous throw by Wentz, by the way. I don't know if you saw the all-22 of that one, but it was sick. And that was the throw that got me up out of my chair and was like, whoa, that's 2017 Wentz.
Yeah.
I was like,
this is
hello.
Prime Wentz. And that's the thing, is when they lost those closer games to good teams like the Seahawks early in the season, Wentz wasn't playing great. Like, if you look at his first 4 weeks of stats, he played pretty average. Now, there's a lot of reason for that. It's a new team. It's adjustment to scheme, to staff. Like, you're getting your feet under you, and all of a sudden there was no real indication that it was going to take this kind of jump over the last 2 weeks, but it has. Like, it is all clicking right now. And again, if you're going to go through play tough teams tough and your quarterback's playing like that, you're going to win a couple of those, because those are plays that turn games. That kind of throw to T.Y. Hilton that made everybody go, whoa, that's a vintage Wentz throw, right? And then you're beating the crap out of the teams you should beat. That puts you in a pretty good position come the end of the year as to be the division leader. And again, they're not in a world-beating division. If they're getting good quarterback play, the rest of the team's playing solid like it has throughout the year, if they just sort of continue that, you add great quarterback play, the Colts become a player at the end of the year, for sure.
I'm really, this is going to be one of the teams that I think fascinates me down the stretch, because they do have a game against the Jets, which they should win. They're playing the 49ers this week, who've not been playing particularly well, but it's also the 49ers, so you never know what you're going to get. They have a couple games against the Jags, which they should also win. But down that last half of the season, they also play Tennessee again, who's a good team. They play Buffalo, Tampa, New England, Arizona, and the Raiders. That's like 6 of their last 8 games.
That's murderer's row. Wentz is going to have to play out of his mind. He's going to have to stay healthy, and he's going to have to play out of his mind. That is like, if you could line up, if you could just sort of take the 6 worst teams, if you're a Colts hater and you're like, who can you pull from the NFL to like shake out of the bag and put on their schedule so that it just buries them? It's like, that's probably like 5 or 6 out of the 7 or 8 teams that you would pick, because that's rugged. All those teams are playing really well. So they're going to have to continue to play, and they're going to have to steal some.
I mean, the Tampa game in particular is in Indy, and as we know, Tom Brady isn't exactly huge fans of the Colts. And angry Tom Brady's the most dangerous man in football. So we'll see how they do. But at least for now, Carson Wentz looking good, and we love to see it. And then last segment for Three Interesting here. I want to have a little chat about one Patrick Mahomes, because I think he has ascended into being the man that he has been compared to for so long now. And I think he really is a clone of Brett Favre now, where amazing play. Like there was a throw to Tyreek, and I'll throw it on screen here. I'll throw a couple angles on screen here, because there was one that I saw on Twitter that was recorded from the stands where it's like you see it directly from behind Mahomes, where he's rolling out to his right and he's like outside the numbers, and then throws back to his left, too far hash, and Tyreek's not even on the screen. And then all of a sudden you see this little dude running 4-2 across the field out of nowhere and catch this ball for a huge gain. It's a throw that only Mahomes makes. And that's so Brett Favre. But then you also look at the 15 picks in the last 15 games. The Chiefs lead the league in turnovers this year. He's got 8 picks this year so far. Not all of them his fault. A few of them are off tip balls. Like one was off Tyreek's hands this week, but then there was the other one that was completely inexcusable, where it was under pressure and just popped up in the air and got picked again. But he is so Brett Favre now, where you're gonna get those random, oh my God, interceptions. But you're also going to get all of those crazy, oh my God, throws that still keep the Chiefs in games. And like they were dead even with Washington in this one. It was like 10-13, 13-13, somewhere around there. And then they exploded in the end of the game and ended up blowing them out. But that is Patrick Mahomes. And it reminds me so much of those like mid to late 90s and early 2000s Packers, which I know you know well. Pre-Aaron Rodgers era, where you never really knew what you were going to get, but you knew you were going to be entertained, and you knew there was going to be a lot of points on the board. Will the Chiefs win the Super Bowl this year with this kind of up and down, not even up and down, this kind of inconsistent result with Mahomes? I don't know, because in previous years they had a defense that could make up for the interceptions. This year they don't. But I will say that for the people who think that Mahomes has fallen off, I don't think he's fallen off. I just think he has become what he is, which is a gunslinger, a Brett Favre clone, and still the most exciting quarterback in the league.
He's in an interesting spot. The Chiefs are in an interesting spot. The defense has to get better, or the Chiefs are not really going to threaten deep into the postseason. Will they make the postseason? They might. I would never write them out as long as Pat's healthy. The offensive line has played much better this year than late last year. That's not saying a lot, because the line was destroyed last year. But they've had, really good contributions from Creed Humphrey and Smith. And, two rookies that they didn't necessarily expect to start. It's been much improved, but the defense has turned into ghosts before Halloween, which is not great. Dan Sorensen got himself benched, not surprisingly, after multiple not great performances.
I don't know why Juan Thornhill wasn't playing in the first place.
I don't really either. But the Mahomes to Favre thing is interesting, because he has that ability to make something out of nothing that very few, if no other, quarterbacks can make. The throw you're talking about is one of them. He seems to be slipping a little bit more towards that, and I think it's partly pressing, knowing that he can't just hand the ball back to the defense and say, hold him and, get it back for me, which he could with some more confidence over the last couple of years. He thinks he has to do it while the ball's in his hands, and that, I don't want to say forces him, I will say causes him to take some of those chances that maybe he had legislated out of his game over the past couple of years. They're going to be really interesting to watch down the stretch, because they could absolutely go down on a fireball if they can't get the defensive ship righted. Football's still a team sport. If the defense is allowing, 35 points a game, it's going to be tough sledding for the Chiefs. They're not going to win as many games as they might need to down the stretch. But watching how Mahomes adjusts given all of those variables is going to be fascinating because he's a wildly talented physical player. He's pretty healthy this year, and he can do pretty much anything from anywhere on the field, which very few, if no other quarterbacks can do in the league. And that makes it a fascinating watch no matter what, because you just don't know if it's going to be that play where he suddenly just does the jaw-dropping, oh my God thing, because he can do it on any given play. So makes the Chiefs, again, a fascinating watch down the stretch to see how the whole team evolves, and even if not, just to watch Mahomes be Mahomes.
You know, we talked about the Murderer's Row schedule that the Colts have. 5 of the Chiefs' next 6 games: Titans, Raiders twice, Packers, Cowboys. Like, oof. Not a good time to have a bad defense. So Mahomes is gonna have to beat Brett Favre, hopefully minus a few of the interceptions, because he's gonna have to be superhuman to get them through that stretch. And I do not think that they're gonna. If they go like 500 in that stretch, that's a win for them, because they're playing against more complete football teams that also have really good quarterbacks and MVP candidates themselves. Like Derrick Henry, MVP candidate; Aaron Rodgers, MVP candidate; Dak Prescott, MVP candidate. You got a Defensive Player of the Year candidate in Max Crosby, and Derek Carr is playing really well too. Like, I don't know. I perhaps we vastly overestimated the Chiefs, but if there is one quarterback in the league that can drag this corpse of a defense deep this season, it's going to be Pat.
Yeah, I just think we all thought the defense would be decent. At least we actually thought it would be pretty good, and it hasn't even been decent. It's been terrible, and I don't know anybody that saw that coming. There were people that talked about Chiefs regression overall as a team, but I didn't see anybody preseason that was saying their defense is going to be dog doo-doo.
Historically bad.
Yeah, and that's largely what it's been. It's been really not great. So,
all right, EJ, it is Shot of the Week time. And for once, we actually get to celebrate something that the Bears did. Last week's winner, by popular vote. Ooh, it's a nice cork sound for Cazadores. Interesting.
It is a nice cork
James
sound.
Daniels delivering the spine buster to, who was it? Denzel Perryman, I think it
was Perryman.
On the second level. And just, I mean, it was great. I'll throw the video on the screen so you guys can see it again. Honestly, one of my favorite bootleg Shot of the Week winners we've ever had. It was awesome, especially for an offensive lineman to get it. So I want to toast to you, James Daniels. Got my shot at Cazadores.
Ooh.
Thank you for finally giving us a Bears highlight to celebrate.
I have something interesting. I
What's
didn't
that?
drink the whole bottle. So it's Redemption Bourbon, and I did not drink the whole bottle, just for you. I am using this to make something special for fall, but I saved one shot of it. I'm using the whole rest of the bottle to make something interesting that I'll share with you later, but I took out one tiny shot of it. So here's to James Daniels and his pro class wrestling move of grabbing thigh pads and teaching people not to jump if you're in front of an offensive lineman.
Goes down easier every week.
That's good stuff. It's a good base to start with. I will share my fall. It's a very fall themed project. I will share it with you in a subsequent show, but I have to wait 10 days. So.
Oh, now I'm intrigued.
I know you should be. This is right up your alley too. You're gonna love this. So I'm excited. But no, the Redemption all by itself, good stuff.
This week's nominees for Shot of the Week. Number 1, we got Randy Gregory, absolutely detonating Mac Jones' ribcage. Really quick win around the edge. Mac never saw him coming. Forced the fumble, which ended up being a turnover in favor of Dallas. Huge play in that game. Absolutely huge play in that game. Especially in the first half, that was like back and forth. There was blocked punts. There was fumbles on the goal line. There was sack. I mean, it was nuts. The game honestly should have been a lot higher scoring than it was, and it still hit the over at like 55 or whatever it was. But massive play by Randy Gregory. Huge hit. So good play by him. Option number 2, we got Trey Brown. in his first game ever for the Seahawks as a rookie.
That counts. He's played preseason, but this was his first regular season action.
And made a fantastic play on Ray McCloud in overtime. Reading the quarterback's eyes, coming off late and just laying a huge hit short of the sticks to make the stop. Again, a big play for them. Still ended up losing the game, but wanted to give him a shout out, especially for making a forearm tackle. I mean, textbook tackle down there. Held up his guy long enough for help to come and finish the job. And then option number 3, Derrick Henry, who we talked about. This hit a little bit earlier. Micah Hyde sacrificing himself in the name of the Buffalo Bills, putting life on the line to get run over by a human train. So also shout out to Micah for taking that hit, but also Derrick Henry. I mean, god damn, he just punishes people, especially at full speed. One of my favorite Henry runs from the night. And then option number 4, this is one that I actually saw live. Donovan Peoples-Jones. I can't remember what Cardinals DB it was, but DPJ kind of stopped on the sideline and lowered his shoulder and just punished this dude on the way in the end zone. He had a great game overall, but that was probably either that or the Hail Mary was probably the best play he made. This was certainly the most physical play he made, just taking a DB for a ride and kind of planting him in the dirt on the way to the end zone. So pretty good group of nominees we got this week, I would say.
Yeah, DPJ, it was great to see that game from him. It's a silver lining thing. Look, the NFL's full of injuries. It's a brutal sport. People get injured every season. One of the good things, if there is a good thing that comes out of that, is you get guys that are on that fringe of playing time, on the fringe of starting, on the fringe of a wide receiver rotation, who now are the guy. It's next man up in the NFL. And DPJ, although he tore preseason and had great averages on the catches he made, he wasn't making very many catches. Now, they're down a receiver or two, and it's like, all right, we're going to have to feature you. And he showed up, right? He got the Hail Mary. He got this touchdown we're talking about. He had a big third down conversion over the middle of the field. It was physical, popped right up, told the defensive back all about it, which I was not surprised by. Really cool to see Donovan Peoples-Jones take advantage of the playing time. It's unfortunate that he had to get it via injury to somebody else, but that is the nature of the NFL, and you want to see a guy step up, and he stepped up really big. Derrick Henry, we've talked about at length, so I'll leave that one. Trey Brown is fun. One of those guys had a good Senior Bowl, came from Oklahoma, along with his other defensive backfield mate who we had on 10 Gems, Trey Norwood. They both had good games on opposite sides of the ball. One for Seattle, one for Pittsburgh. Both made big stops. Trey Brown, though, is in a really good spot, again, to get some playing time. They've had some injuries. They've released some folks at corner for the Seahawks, and he came in and did not look like the moment was too big for him. And that bodes really well for him, and quite frankly, really well for the Seahawks, who have been looking for some kind of something to stop somebody at the corners. That Ken Norton Jr. led defense has not had that. And Trey Brown opened some eyes. Certainly he was the talk of talk radio for the first 2 or 3 days of the week. It looks like there's some potential there, and he played very well again in his first live action that counts. And Randy Gregory had a couple of big plays in this game. This was the sort of more famous of the two, but he made an impact, not only on the stat sheet, but also on Mac Jones. Mac Jones tried to get up really quickly from this one. It took him a minute. This was I think it was the 5th fastest sack from the snap in the league this year. Randy got around the corner lickety split. He did not take any time. It was 2-point-something seconds before he hit Mac Jones, and man, did he hit him right in the square of the back. So really solid group of nominees, and it'll be interesting because I don't think there's like a clear winner this week. James Daniels, good fun last week, but I don't think we have any sort of outright favorites as we read the list, and that's always fun.
So if you want to vote for the winner, if you go into the YouTube version of this show, I'll have a pinned comment with all the nominees, and you can vote there. And from there, let's get to the Week 7 watch list. These are 3 games that we're really excited to watch this weekend. There were not a whole lot of, let's be honest, great games on the docket, at least on paper. in my opinion, but these are the three that we felt were probably the best of the bunch. It's the 4-2 Bengals going against the aforementioned great 5-1 Ravens, arguably top 2 team in the league. Bengals maybe a little bit ahead on the rebuild compared to what our preseason expectations were, but Joe Burrow is playing amazing. Jamar Chase is having one of the greatest rookie seasons that I can remember for a receiver ever. He's on pace for over 1,500 yards this year and a boatload of touchdowns, which is just insane considering he hasn't even, or at least before this season, hadn't played football in like 18 months. So it's going to be fascinating to see that.
And we got to talk about Chris Evans too.
Yeah, where the fuck did that come from?
Yeah, that's what we got to talk about with Chris Evans. Chris Evans, running back, Michigan. Neither one of us were terribly high on him. As you know, I'm intrigued by running back play. I watch a lot of running backs every year. Chris Evans, not average as an athlete, but as a runner on the football field in pads at Michigan, was pretty damn average. He is one of those guys that I had marked down as gets what's blocked. He very rarely broke plays. He did not have a lot of receiving, and this reminds me very much of your Herbert take at Oregon because of the system, right? It was we didn't give the system enough credit for suppressing Herbert's production, and I think there's a little bit of that with Chris Evans at Michigan too, where he didn't get many pass catching opportunities. And if you saw the pass catching touchdown from this last weekend,
it was insane.
Laid out diving catch in the end zone on basically outside wheel route, like with speed. So he's showing every bit of athleticism. Again, he tested very well, but he looked really average running in Michigan's attack, and he had almost no passing yardage. So I had him down as sort of a jag, not a jaguar, a jag, just another guy. Like he was an athlete, and if your coach liked him, sure, pick him up and put him in your rotation, maybe put him on your practice squad. That's the level I had Chris Evans at. The way he's producing over the last couple of weeks on the field has been, like you said, where did that come from? It's eye-opening. So a miss for me on Chris Evans. Again, not accounting for how Michigan's scheme apparently suppressed him. Now, it's funny because we talk about DPJ and we actually figured in a little bit of that on DPJ and said, oh, well, it's Michigan, so he can do more than that. He'll be a better pro. We didn't say that about Evans, and man, is he proving us wrong right now.
I'm trying to see where he got drafted at. So he was a 6th-round pick, so even the NFL was like, you know, and then he shows up in the league and is suddenly a much better player.
Just bang, yeah. So
funny,
anyway, shout out to
that works.
Shout out to Chris Evans.
Next up on the watch list, we got Chiefs Tennessee. Again, this is it's a must-win game for the Chiefs. Like, there's no other way to say it. Like they have to win this game. Get back above 500. Because if they go, 3-4? If they lose this, if they go 3-4, it's going to be really tough for them, not just to win the division, but in terms of playoff seeding. They're going to have to spend the entire playoffs on the road with a bad defense. It's like they have to win this game to get back in the race for the division so that they could at least have one game in January at Arrowhead if they even get to the playoffs.
Do you feel like it's going to be a slugfest? I feel like it's going
to be a Derrick Henry game. A slugfest for Derrick Henry, but it's going to be. I think there's a decent shot that it's going to start out Chiefs ahead. Like they'll get some big plays to Tyreek or Travis or whoever, and they'll go up, and it's going to be very similar to the Seattle game, where deep shot, they go up by 2 possessions, and Henry's just rolling. They break off a big run. All of a sudden, it's a 7-point game in the fourth quarter. You're getting a little nervous. Tennessee gets a stop, and Henry gets the ball back, and then you're going to overtime, and oh shit, it happens again. Like that's how the Titans win. They go down, and then Henry's just like, I'm still coming. I'm gonna get you.
I think this one's gonna be super physical because look, Vrabel's games are. Like the Titans are built to be super physical, and I don't just mean Derrick Henry. I think it was Ben Solak that put out a tweet this week and said, Mike Vrabel, we will just be bigger than everybody at every position. That's my coaching strategy. And he's not wrong. Like Vrabel wants tough guys. He wants hitters. And these two teams also have history. So there's Vrabel built the Titans to be super physical and run people over. And then the Chiefs and Titans have locked up for AFC sort of top spot a couple of times. There's a little bit of bad blood there too. I think some people are going to get knocked around in this one, and the Chiefs defense is going to have to buckle the chin strap a little bit tighter if they want to compete.
Yeah, they're going to need their safeties to sacrifice themselves like Micah Hyde did. So good luck with that.
Good luck with that.
And then last game this week on our watch list is a Philly and Vegas. You know, I'm not going to confuse Philly with a contender right now, but I do find them a very intriguing team. And Vegas is obviously, you know, playing very well, especially considering their circumstances too. So you never really know what you're going to get with Jalen Hurts. You know, Lane Johnson's back, which is big for them. They've dealt with a lot of offensive line absences, either through injury or otherwise. Shout out to Lane Johnson, by the way, for addressing, you know, his mental health and taking time away from the game and getting right. Good for him. Happy to see that he's back and with his teammates and feeling better. But yeah, this game is really, really intriguing to me because the Eagles defense has been very inconsistent. You know, good one week, bad the next. The offensive line has been highly inconsistent. Hurts himself has been highly inconsistent. But when they're on, they're a dangerous team. You know, they have some weapons, Quez Watkins, Devonta Smith, obviously. When they decide to run the ball, Miles Sanders has been effective. They don't run it that often. So, you know, going up against a Vegas team that also I think is super interesting and just fun to watch. Like, I'll probably tune into this game more for entertainment's sake than anything else.
Yeah, this is not, I want to be clear that this is not a game that we think is a game of equals. And I said it a little bit at the top, but this felt like the first week where there weren't as many marquee games. Normally when I'm going through and I'm writing up the watch list, it's like, oh, I could do that one or that one or that one. And it's just flavors of great. This week it was like, well, Ravens-Bengals is interesting. It's a divisional game. Again, not evenly matched, but could be a very fun game and a game that tells us a lot about two teams. Chiefs-Titans, it's really about the implication for the Chiefs and the fact that the Titans are a wild card. And then it was like, what do I pick after that? I ended up picking Eagles-Raiders because Eagles have played inconsistently, but at very high levels on defense. I won't say very high levels on offense. They really haven't flashed a sort of a full game of offensive production that's really scary, and the Raiders are playing at a pretty high level, so it's about whether or not the Eagles can give the Raiders a game, but that was really kind of the best third game on the schedule, and I felt like this is the first week that that's happening. It's a combination of the league sort of sorting itself into strata or tiers. We talked about that again at the top, that we pretty much know who's good. There's a wide middle of interesting teams, and then there are teams that are struggling at the bottom and are probably going to be there at the end of the year. The Jacksonvilles, the Lions, and if anybody in the comments jumps in and says, but Jacksonville just won, I will shout them down because Jacksonville's going to be at the bottom at the end of the year. Just felt like the first week where it wasn't just like, oh, here's my smorgasbord of games and I can pick the very best ones. It was like, well, these are the best of what's there, but that's a first.
Yeah, but I mean, knowing the NFL, regardless of what games look like on paper, there's going to be some craziness that happens. It's just been that kind of season. We're going to get good games regardless, even if we don't necessarily expect it. Before we get out of here for good, I do want to remind everybody that we are holding a patron-only Q&A stream this Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific time. If you're in either of the top two tiers over on Patreon, which is linked down below, stop by, hang out with us, ask us questions. We'll probably be watching film and just talking ball, hanging out. Whatever you want to talk about, we'll talk about. So again, that is 9 a.m. this Saturday, October 23rd, 9 a.m. Pacific time for anybody who's in the top two tiers on Patreon. And also remember, if you are a patron, you do get discounts on merchandise over on the store, also linked below. We have pretty much everything you can think of in terms of bootleg merch. Yeah, got my beanie that I wear every single week, EJ's shirt, all that. So you get a lot for your money, your hard-earned money that you guys decide to give to us to support the show, and we thank you for that. Also want to thank members of the Bootleg Hall of Fame, Murat Khan Ege. God, I hope I really don't want to butcher that name too terribly. Murad, if you can send me a DM and let me know what the actual pronunciation is, I would love that. And then Konstantin Hausler, again, thank you to our executive producers over in the Hall of Fame. We appreciate you guys a lot. So with that, we're going to get out of here. Thank you, everybody, for listening or watching, whatever platform you choose to consume Bootleg Football. We really appreciate it. And we will be back next week to break down Week 7 and look ahead to Week 8. And if you're going to stop by to the stream on Saturday, thank you for that. And we'll see you then. So see you guys soon.
Take care.